Hey everybody, welcome back to We Eat So Good. This is Phil, and in today's video I'm going to be attempting my very first homemade sourdough loaf of bread. And I'm using my own sourdough starter that I made in a previous episode. Her name is Lois, and I'm very proud of her. So here I took a little bit of my starter, about 1/4 cup, and mixed it with warm water. And then once I got that thoroughly mixed, I let that sit for about 10 minutes. And then I added my King Arthur organic bread flour. So once that was all in, I added my salt as well, and then I mixed it all up. For the specifics of the measurements that I used and the very detailed instructions, I'll make sure I put that in the description below. For my first loaf here, I followed another recipe that I found online that had very clear instructions. It was actually from a website called Bless This Mess, so I'll link to that in the description as well. But I'll kind of give you an overview of what I was doing as I'm kind of narrating the video here. So once it sat for an hour, I kind of pulled it up like this and stretched it as I rotated it right into the middle. This kind of builds the structure of the bread. And once I did that a few times and I could kind of feel it tightening up, I think I went around 3 times total. Then I took a large bowl, put some oil in it, and then this is where I covered it. This part is called the bulk rise. So this is where it's going to get most of its volume from, and it takes the longest amount of time. I let this one rise for 10 hours. I've made a couple of loaves since, and there's been some that have taken up to 15, 16 hours to rise. It depends on the time of year, I guess the humidity, but mostly it's the temperature of the kitchen. So after the bulk rise, I pull out my dough here. It's looking very puffy, it's looking very nice. I can see a few bubbles there, and I'm very gently forming it into the shape of my loaf, which I want to be like circular. Once I achieved the shape that I wanted, I covered it with a moist tea towel and let the dough rest for about 10 minutes, and then I oiled a smaller mixing bowl, and I'm going to put the dough in the smaller mixing bowl once I dust it really well with flour. You'll find out in a minute that I didn't dust it quite enough, but here I let it sit at room temperature for 2 hours. And then it looks like that. It's spread out nicely. Some of the bubbles are still in there. And this was a very cool tip from that website that I was using called Bless This Mess. It said to cut parchment with little handles on it to make it easier to pull out of the Dutch oven once the bread is done. So I flip it just like this, and then it's supposed to slide right out of this bowl. Not quite. All right, so here I'm shaking the bowl a little bit. It came out. No big deal. This is easily fixed. Just kind of shove it right over to the middle, and then once I got it where I wanted it to be, I let it sit for another 10 minutes, because that's kind of the rule, I guess, with bread dough. It's whenever you touch it or mess with it, let it rest for a minute. This part's very important. Make some slashes in the top. They don't have to be this particular pattern, but this is where the dough can expand as it cooks in the oven. For all you sourdough experts out there, I'd love to hear what you guys do. I'd love to hear what I did wrong or what you think could be done better. Leave it in the comments below, because I'm still a novice and I'd love to learn everything I can. So into the Dutch oven it goes, then into a 450-degree oven for 30 minutes. Then I uncover it and let it cook for another 30 minutes. And look at the results. This came out better than I could have expected. It had a great look to it. I nearly burned my fingers here as I try to lift it up for the camera. Once it cooled a little, I can get a better shot. Once I cut into it, you can see the bubbles inside. You can see the crumb there. As I pull it apart, you can see the texture. The flavor was amazing. The smell was incredible. For my very first loaf, I was super, super happy. So thank you for watching, guys. If you want to follow the instructions below or follow the recipe on the website, I leave a link to it in my description.